Welcome back to Security Expert Online, where today we welcome Sarah Janes, who's the Managing Director of an organisation called Layer 8, a relatively new and unique capability in the security industry. Sarah, thanks for coming to talk to us today.
Thank you.
How did Layer 8 come about and what does it do?
Well, at Layer 8, we exist to help businesses develop proactive behaviours to protect their business. And it came about because as cybercrime particularly was increasing, what we saw in security vendors was lots and lots of technical companies jumping up, new types of firewalls, new ways of preventing attacks coming into the organisation. However, what had failed to mature over the last sort of 10 or 15 years was how we look at people in our business, how we educate and train people. And as we know, hackers at the moment they're targeting humans. I mean, it's so much easier to cast a phishing email out to hundreds of thousands of people and see if there's somebody who'll click on the link than develop a really difficult technical way to get into the business by writing new code. So we needed to help educate staff, and we didn't feel that there was any businesses at the moment that were doing it in the right way to actually change behaviours.
That's a great innovation and very important. I love the strapline on your website, turning on the human firewall. And you can create, if you've got a staff of 10,000 extra eyes on the ground to feed in. But it's creating that culture where they're not scared to report incidents. How do you go about that?
Well, first of all, I think we need to change some of the vocabulary. IT managers, security people, for all the years that I've been hearing them, we talk about things like insider threat, we talk about the weakest link, we talk about the stupid people. First of all, let's bring these people, they are part of our human firewall. They can be positive influencers. Let's first of all start to bring those people in, treat them as adults. We use conversation and collaboration a lot to change behaviours, and part of that, creating that human firewall, is opening that conversation up right across the business. It's not just end users as we sort of refer to them, it's also about the security team, it's about the exec, it's about getting those people to collaborate on the best processes and practices to secure the business, rather than just creating them in an isolated room as a security department.
But talk about the staff, let's look at the leadership of the organisation as well, and getting the C-suite buy-in is critical in this exercise as well, I would think.
Extremely important. In fact, one of my bugbears, you hear a lot with the breaches that have happened recently about, the IT department didn't know how to do this, the IT department should have done that. Actually, private and public sector organisations alike, I hear the IT department screaming out to their boards and chief execs about what needs to be done, but they have got their ears closed. They're not listening. They're saying, this is a barrier to us doing business. How does that help us develop our business? Of course, I'm not suggesting here that businesses suddenly divert their attention from what's core and start becoming a security organisation. But what I am saying is every single business now needs to have security as part of their strategy. They need to think about how security can make them better. Need to think about how security can enhance their brand.
But security used to be seen as a grudge purchase. It was something you didn't really want to buy, but you had to. One of the words that's in your vocabulary on your website is resilience. Mm-hmm. And that encompasses more than just security, but survivability of the supply chain, for example, and coping with extreme weather conditions. Do you think that's the way ahead, to get the C-suite involved?
Yeah, I think it's about resilience. I also think it's about what customers are asking for as well now. With the very public cases that have happened, customers will now ask, how are you looking after my data? How are you securing my data? And also, for the first time with the ransomware on the NHS computers, it started to affect people personally. That's something that hasn't happened before. TalkTalk had a big breach, but it didn't really hurt anybody. But waiting lists, cancelled operations, when it affects people's flesh and bones effectively, people are standing up and taking a little bit more notice. So yes, it's about resilience, you know, the little bit of money that you can spend on protecting your business, making it stronger, making sure that if somebody is targeting your organisation, actually there's weaker ones to go to. But also about how you can make it better for your customers. Customers will now choose organisations that are going to look after them.
And one of the things that I always stress is the need for personal situational analysis and awareness. One sees so many people rushing around, looking at their mobile phones, headphones on, completely detached from what's going on around them. Is that a problem for you to make people aware of the circumstances they're in?
It is a massive problem actually, and that's what a lot of hackers play on at the moment, because they know that people just react quite often. So one of the reasons that phishing emails, for example, are so successful is not because we're all stupid people and we can't be bothered to recognise and we just click on anything. It's actually because they play on the fact that we're so rushed, that we're so in our own worlds, that we're probably not going to have time to check, to look at whether that really makes sense. Would my boss really be asking me to transfer £500,000 when he's on holiday? One of the biggest things that we advocate is just allow yourself to stop and think and consider, is this really what it seems to be? And when we talk about culture, that needs to come from the top. That needs to be something that's allowed and acceptable, right from the senior managers to the boss, to the finance manager, to say, okay, we don't have to jump on this now, because hackers will use a lot of emotion and fear. I mean, I had one the other week. It was a phishing email about my Layer 8 domain name. I was going to lose it if I didn't respond in the next sort of 24 hours. And I thought, yes, and then I thought, no, hang on a moment. Don't react with my emotion. Stop and allow myself to think this through. And actually, I'd already renewed that domain name the week before.
So easy to do, but you know, the importance of getting this annual training for everybody who uses an IT system, which is all of us these days, is so great. But how do you deliver the training? What modes do you give? Do you give people a textbook, or how do you deliver this? How do you make it interesting?
Well, this might sound a little bit woolly, but what we use is conversation, because textbooks, PowerPoint presentations, the annual online e-learning, they've been around for a while, haven't they? And I don't know about you, but I probably haven't changed my behaviour after reading a poster, after going through my annual computer-based training. But it's when we have a conversation with somebody that can give it context, and somebody that can give it meaning, and somebody that can make it relevant for me, then I do change my behaviour. So we work a lot with conversation, and the methods that we use are to help those conversations have a place, have a format, have some focus, so that they can be delivered through the organisations by the people who can give them meaning, make them relevant. And what that allows is it's sort of that two-way eyes and ears. So it's about the exec and the security teams being able to deliver some messages to employees, but actually, and more importantly, it's about those employees, wherever they sit in the organisation, being able to pass messages back. So we're getting a much better view of the real risks that lie in the organisation by having that two-way communication. And importantly, it can be measured, because measurement is something that comes up quite a lot. It's easy to see whether a firewall is doing its job because you can look at the analytics. And one of the objections sometimes to doing anything with regards to the human factor is, do we really know that it's working? So opening up this network of people, allowing them to have the conversations, picking people who become your security champions, who take on an additional role within the organisation, suddenly you can see what is happening differently.
So we talked a lot about the cyber world. What about the physical security world? And we live in a very dangerous environment at the moment, where the UK has had 3 terrorist attacks within the past 3 months. using very different modes of attack each time. How can we use your methods to get this message across to the public about vigilance and reporting? Is there anything you can do to help out the police and the public bodies to interface with this problem?
Interesting, we do work alongside the police in the cyber role, but not so much in the physical world. And I think, yes, using the conversational approach again can really spread the message. But we talk about a number of things. We talk about context and we talk about process. Now, I think the context in this particular area about why you would need to behave in a certain way is quite obvious when we're seeing these terrorist attacks. But what about process? And I don't think we hear enough about process. I certainly haven't heard much on the news other than we're advising people to remain vigilant. Well, what does that actually mean? Can we distill that down into a couple of things that people can actually do proactively on a day-to-day basis to remain vigilant? How do they go about doing that?
I think particularly in the community, where community policing is all important, your philosophy could reach out to the community and, report to the police what's different, what's changed. And that will help them considerably to pick up on these things. So going back to the cyber world, everybody at the moment is very conscious of cyber. What training would you advise if I was the managing director of a company? What would you say to me now I need to be really worried about and focusing on in training my staff to repel an attack?
I would say you need to not train them in absolutely everything. We don't need people to be security experts, but there's probably 5 behaviours that we should be looking at for most organisations. First of all, it's the source of emails. So are they malicious? Are they relevant? And what do I do to check that out? The second thing is about people on your buildings, on your sites. We've got lots of joint ventures going on, etc. Is that person supposed to be there? There are lots of ways that you can challenge them without being aggressive. We're very nice as humans, aren't we? And we always want to hold the doors open for people. The other thing is about software updates. So are people updating the software? Are they putting it off? And why should they do that? It's all right, the IT department putting a compulsory thing in for everybody to update their IT systems, but people will always find ways to circumnavigate it. Put it in as part of a regular ongoing training process. Like I say, I don't think the annual computer-based trainings work. I think we need to give people the opportunity to talk about this. Security needs to become part of the conversation that's happening when people are thinking about new suppliers, when they're thinking about new employees. How does it fit into the processes of the organisation? And the other thing is to humanise the people that sit behind the data. When we talk about security, sometimes we talk about asset registers and classifications, etc. But if we just sit down with a person and say, tell us about the people that sit behind this data. Who are they? What do they do? And if they walked into your business today and asked you, how are you protecting my data? What would you say about how it travels around your business?
There's lots of examples. Do you use case studies and look at individual breaches to get that message over?
We do look at case studies and individual. We do look at case studies and individual breaches, but sometimes just telling somebody else's story isn't as effective as helping people think about what their own story could be. One of the techniques that we use a lot is called the hacker's perspective. So we teach people about some of the social tactics that a hacker will use. Now, this could be a computer hacker, but it could be anybody sort of wanting in on a company. It could be a physical reason, it could be logical. And then we ask people to identify the crown jewels in their organisation. So then they have 2 great things. They know what vulnerabilities somebody might exploit, and they know what their own crown jewels are. Then straight away, they start to identify issues with their processes or gaps that they say, we need to change the way that we do that. And actually, I think that's a lot more relevant than using somebody else's case study. Case studies can be used to kick things off, but really talking about what they're doing and getting people to come to the answer themselves. Some of the challenges are, well, that's taken 2 hours to do something I could have stood up there and told you in 15 minutes, but does it stick? And retention of information is really important, and people going away and actually living by those new behaviours is really important as well.
Do you find you're pushing against an open door, or is there a bit of a struggle to get this message over?
When we get into the right organisations, we're pushing against an absolutely open door. The struggle is to get through the door, but once we talk to employees on the ground, they really want to talk about it, because most people care about the organisations they work for. They're proud, they want to defend it, and when they have the opportunity to do so, they get really, really into it. We've had some great conversations with people in businesses.
Fantastic. And what sort of companies do you target? Is there any particular group or any particular sector that you specifically aim your product at?
No, absolutely not. But most of the organisations that we work with at the moment have one of three things they're trying to protect. They're either trying to protect financial information, or they're trying to protect personal information, or they're trying to protect intellectual property. That tends to be the three people. However, a really good story that I like to tell. We were at an event the other week, and a colleague of mine was telling a story, and this lady said to him, "This is all well and good, but I really don't think it's relevant to me. I'm one lady, I take photographs, I edit them on my Mac, I send them out." And we said to her, "Well, tell us about the busiest weekend you've ever had." She said, "Well, I'm a wedding photographer, so one weekend, wedding Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday." And we said, "Well, what happened if you opened your computer up on Tuesday morning and there was a ransomware message and you had to pay £500, or those people would never see the pictures of the most important day of their life?" And she suddenly went, "I'd be dead. I'd never run that business again. I probably would never run another business again." And I think the trick is really helping businesses identify what are their most important assets, what are their crown jewels, what could they not do without. You might not think a hacker would want it, but if they can get a couple of £100 off you and disrupt things, then you're game, unfortunately.
And there's some clever people out there who can do that on a big scale now. So just tell me a little bit about the future and where do you see the business going? Because the cyber criminal is going to get more and more clever all the time. They're developing new techniques to dodge around firewalls. Your business is relatively new, but I think it's going to grow pretty quickly as an awareness comes that we're losing this battle.
That's right, and what we want to do, our aim is to make sure that every single person is educated enough to just stop and think about it. You're right, techniques are changing all the time, so lots of rules and do's and don'ts are never going to do the trick, because as soon as somebody's learnt one attack vector, it changes. But it's that situational awareness that you spoke about. We have lots of information that we're giving out about activities that people can do. You mentioned the webinars before, so there's a lot of information that we're constantly giving out to businesses about how they can engage their workforce, how they can start conversations within their business.
So really, Sarah, you're taking the battle to the enemy in what is an increasingly dangerous and difficult environment that's going to be with us for a long time. Computers are not going to be reinvented, criminality is not going to be reinvented, and you're in the right space just at the right time. We wish you well. I'm sure the future will be very interesting indeed. Thank you for coming to talk to us.